Hello, welcome to ArtShow. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me Laurie Beck-Peterson. Hi, Laurie. How are you?
I'm great.
Great to have you on the show. I wanted to share some images of yours to begin with, so people get an idea of the kind of work that you do. So I went on your site and I selected a few, and I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about this piece in particular. I loved this one.
Yeah. This is an earlier work. Most of my work is landscape based in gum bichromate in any case. It's from a pinhole camera, a very small pinhole camera set down at the edge of the woods. I'm very close to the Wissahickon. And so I was just kind of drawn in by the leaves that had fallen and the empty trees in the background. And so, yeah, so it's this from a very small pinhole image that I then enlarged to print in gum.
So it's a gum bichromate.
It is. Yep.
I love that. I love the browns and goes into the dark black. It really works well for this particular image. How big do you print these?
This one, I was printing a little bit larger early on. This is probably about maybe 18 by 18.
Okay. And then this was actually one of the first pieces I saw of yours.
Yeah.
Um,
So this is new. This is newer work as of probably like 2019. This is actually from a body of work called "We All Fall Down," which was made for the Schuylkill Environmental Education Center, where artists were selected to sort of give new meaning to the ash wood that was being cut down because of the emerald ash borer infestation. So
did they give you a piece of wood, or did you have to go out?
oh, a lot of wood. Yeah, we got a lot of wood. No, I went and, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to approach the project. And so I just collected a bunch of pieces of wood that had already been cut down and started playing around with them to see if there was a way that I could print on them. The pieces are amazing because the cyanotype is still staying on top. Some people have these outside and they're weathering over nicely, but the little pieces of bark are coming off the edges, which reveal the larval galleries,
Huh.
which is what killed the tree, or what caused the tree to be cut down. So it's dimensional work, and it was a new direction for me, but an exciting one.
I was going to ask you if with this one in particular, did you do anything to the surface of the wood to get the images to print on it? Did you have to seal it in any way?
Well, it's the first couple were fails because the cyanotype just kind of got sucked down into the wood, and there wasn't enough contrast. So, being a gum printer, I always treat my paper. I size my paper with gelatin. So I thought, this has got to work in some way. So I just made sure that the surface was as smooth as I could possibly get it. So that was a lot of sanding, or sometimes the wood shop where I have my studio will help me out with the larger pieces and cut them, smooth them down. And then I put some hot gelatin on there and just sort of, size it and let it cure. And so the cyanotype has sort of a little bit of an emulsion or something to lay on top of. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the bark falls off over time. You're cool with that?
I'm pretty cool with that. Yeah. It took me a while. It took me a while. No, I think that, as I've been working in more ephemeral processes, I've started to embrace that they're not as permanent as my other work might be. Yeah.
Mhm. Interesting. So this one, I just love the quality of the mark making that happened on this one. I thought it was really quite unique. This is
Happened is a good word, because this just happened.
so. Would you consider this kind of like a happy accident kind of a thing?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, this is a smaller piece, correct? They're not that large.
These are 12 by 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that like a usual size that you're comfortable working with?
That's the size that I'm working with now. And I was working much larger before because I was teaching at the University of the Arts. And I was able to make use of a beautiful plate maker that they had, which allowed me to work larger. My exposure units are a little bit smaller, so I scaled down a little bit. I still like the square format, but I had to bring it down in size just a little bit. Yeah.
So these are also from Pinhole?
This is actually a Holga image.
All right.
It's Holga, and this was a sort of a reference survey piece that was for the body of work We All Fall Down. And when I approached the project, I just started walking the property and taking photos, and these were not meant to be part of that exhibition. But I printed them large in cyanotype just to see what might be good material to use on the wood pieces. And so, you know, as I was making the work and seeing these nice bold Prussian blue cyanotypes hanging on my wall, I decided that they were really important for a couple of reasons. One is they're a documentation of the land as it was in 2019 when they were cutting this wood down, which changes the landscape when you start getting rid of a lot of your big ash trees. But it was also a little bit of a nod to the origins of cyanotype, which were a means of sort of making a copy of something. And so they became that for me with this project. And yeah.
It's a striking image. This one's a little darker. I don't know if people can see this very well, but I really, I think what strikes me about your work is some of the tonalities, especially in the gum bichromates. You use these like very delicious looking browns and umbers and other things. So I assume this was just a found object, a found nest?
Yeah, I have a collection of nests, and every so often I could walk up to my studio and somebody will have deposited some new ones outside. So I now have a wall of nests outside my studio that I love them. They're one of the most incredible structures that are made. This is
go ahead.
I was going to say, this is a platinum palladium print that's gold leafed on the back.
Interesting. As soon as I saw this, it made me, as a painter, I started thinking of Van Gogh's nests, the way he painted those same birds' nests.
Yep.
I just love the shape. And then finally, this piece really struck me.
Yeah.
So, because it's a little bit different. I assume it's a little bit earlier of a work.
No, this is recent work.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you do? Did you end up with the same sort of sealing process that you did on the wood with this?
Well, I didn't. This is a chlorophyll print, and you don't actually print on it or draw on it. It prints itself. So it's the leaf, it's the chlorophyll in the leaf and the bleaching back of the open areas that form the image. So I'm putting a positive transparency on top of a cut leaf that I'm keeping alive with a floral tube of water as I'm slowly trying to kill it. But when it's done exposing and I lift the transparency, the positive off the top, I photograph them because they immediately start to shift. So to answer your question, I'm not doing anything initially to the leaf, but after I print these, I've been experimenting with a range of sort of preservation techniques of either, coating with resin, which to me felt a little counter to the leaf surface. It was a little shiny and a little sort of turned it not a paperweight, but go in that direction. So I've been using some UV sprays, front and back on the leaf, and then some museum wax on them. And when the actual leaf gets framed, it's set back in a frame with a UV glass, and people shouldn't hang them in the bright sunshine, or they're going to deteriorate more quickly. But
they sandwiched in glass, or
I don't sandwich them. I just sort of they just kind of get stitched in there on on the back. But usually it's maybe a really nice piece of board or a really beautiful printmaking paper. Yeah.
So I gotta ask, the music itself, what is it?
All right, there's a story. This is a very special piece for me. The original,
I knew there was a story.
There is a story. The original piece was made as a gift to my father for Father's Day. And my father is a percussionist. He's still alive. He's 90. spent his career teaching at the Eastman School of Music, and he was the timpanist in the Philharmonic. And he composed a piece called 3 Episodes for Timpani for my brother, also a percussionist. And my brother performed it at, I believe it was his senior recital at Oberlin, like a long time ago. But it was important for me to use the actual handwritten music that my dad did, because that's a memory that I have growing up of him sitting at the piano or sitting where the drums, whatever, and composing something. So I really liked that aspect rather than the printed music that, somebody would have purchased. But because of my dad's age and because of his history as a musician, he's had a lot of serious hearing loss. And so, I wanted to, somebody said to me, I love your leaf, but I want to hear it. So I thought, okay, we've got to figure this out. So I ended up getting a recording of my brother's performance of this and attaching a QR code to the gift that I gave my father so that he can scan the QR code with his phone and he can hear it through his hearing aids. So
that's fantastic. I really love it when an artist can give me just a little something that totally changes my understanding of a piece of work. So that was magnificent. Thank you very much for sharing about that.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about your start in arts. Can you remember anything in your childhood, anything maybe where you got your first exposure to art, where aside from the music, obviously you come from a musical family, but I mean for visual arts, was there anything that just sort of got you rolling?
Well, I think, you grow up in a family of musicians who are also patrons of the arts. My brother and I were exposed to a lot of art and culture as kids, and I was always just doodling around or whatever. I do remember that my brother would get sent off to these like fabulous, Adirondack swim trip camps and do all these things, and I'd go to the art museum's art camp or whatever. But I think it was always a part of my childhood. I just enjoyed making things, and it just sort of carried on until I was in high school and my parents gave me a camera, and then I decided I wasn't very successful at being a musician, so I went into the visual arts. So and it just, they were very supportive. It was wonderful to grow up in a family that's very supportive of following something that you're passionate about.
I assume there was art in your home.
Yes, there was. We didn't have any like originals of things, but we had lots of wonderful prints. And there's one specifically that I remember. It was, I forget the name of the piece, but it was one of the portraits of Modigliani's portraits that hung in the living room. And I used to look at that, and I used to look at this face, and it was just, I was captivated by it. And unfortunately, my parents gave it away.
Oh.
I would put that on my wall. But so that, and some prints of Picasso's work, and just I think
that's very liberating, because a lot of artists I talk to, they don't have that exposure. Sometimes there's like a gobsmack moment where they come across art, but then growing up with it has like it's a different start to an artist's life, I think. So tell me about your progression there. So you were in high school, you got a camera. At what point did you decide to become an artist?
Well, I wanted to be a ballet dancer, but it didn't work out. It really didn't work out. I tried. And when I did go to New York very, very briefly, and I realized that was not my thing. And so I kind of let go of a lot of those things and spent more of my time in the art studio. And when it came time to think about what I wanted to do next, I said, I want to go to art school. I just wanted to go to art school. And I didn't start in the photo program at all. Started in printmaking.
Printmaking. Oh, well, that would explain your interest in gum bichromates and everything else.
Kind of came full circle. Yeah.
Right. It's all a tapestry. So speaking of which, I'm curious about the equipment that you use, because you had mentioned pinhole, but you also mentioned a few other things. So what's your go-to?
My go-to is good old analog medium format film.
Really?
Shoot with a holga, and I shoot with I have a beautiful Hasselblad and a Mamiya, and I will use those. But I think for the gum pieces, there's something about the imperfections of a holga and the surprise of a holga, which, if it's not f8, with 400 speed film outside, you're not getting a good image. And so, that is my preferred camera. But I do go off on these tangents where I will decide I'm just going to shoot pinhole for a while. Rarely do I shoot digital that gets used in my process work.
Okay.
Sometimes I will, but I just like process.
Yeah. I mean, that was actually one of my next questions, which is, we live in a digital age now. So what is it about those processes that really that's the reason why you use them anymore?
Well, when I got out of art school, I went on and was a commercial photographer. So I spent a lot of years doing something that was fulfilling, but making work that somebody else wanted me to make.
Okay, right.
And it was film when I started in the 80s, but then, when things started shifting towards digital, I was one of the holdouts. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to quit and I can't do this.
I'm glad you didn't.
I embraced it, but I also felt like this need to continue to make with my hands, like make a darkroom print, or I just with digital, it's lovely. I mean, there's some beautiful work out there, but it doesn't. The making of it is very important to me, and I just don't get that with digital.
So do you think maybe that process oriented, the love of the process is that maybe a little influenced by your early printmaking?
Oh, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Yeah.
I love, getting my hands dirty on printmaking, so I totally get it. I want to switch a little bit because we talked about technical stuff, but I want to actually talk about your content at the moment. Where do you get your ideas from, your creativity? Well, what sparks your creativity, I guess?
I think, if you go way back, it's my love of like the landscape that I grew up in Rochester, the Finger Lakes, the long winters with like trees that have no leaves on them, that kind of thing. But I think that the outdoors, where I've chosen to live as an adult, which is, right next to the Wissahickon, and then starting to think about, what a gift this stuff is to us, and how it, even if I'm not making art or taking pictures or anything, just being out in the landscape is really sort of an experience that centers me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's sort of a natural, I think, transition into the work that I make, to continue to work with the landscape that I love, but also more recently looking at it with a much more critical eye about what it is that we stand to lose if we aren't kind of paying attention to how we exist in the landscape.
That makes perfect sense to me. I mean, it's hearing that it's really kind of like your early memories of the landscape, and the idea, to me, like the idea of cyanotypes always felt like memories anyway. They have that quality about them, that older quality. So when you go to make your pictures, how does your creative process work? Are you more of a discovery person, or do you do a lot of planning?
I don't do any planning, really.
That's awesome.
I don't, and I think the thing is, like everybody laughs at me. I always say to my husband, saying like, look at that light. It's all about the light. And
Right.
it really is, because I might not even be intending to take a photograph. But if the light is right and it's something that's just amazing, I'll pull my cell phone out and take it. I have to,
Right.
use that. But so, there are times when I go out and I, and I photograph with my holga with nothing in particular in mind. And then there's some images that just say, this really would be a beautiful gum print, or as happened with We All Fall Down, like these really worked well as cyanotypes. But even in the newer work that I'm doing, which is eco-friendly, doing anthotypes and printing chlorophyll leaves and working with sustainable stuff, there's no, oh, this goes with it. It doesn't work that way. I work on all of the stuff. It's all mixed up in my studio. Some days I'll make one process and another days I move to something else.
That's what keeps it fresh, I think. Because your work has that quality of almost like an investigative quality, and I appreciate that. And I can assume that, like everybody, you probably keep your phone on you at all times. Do you carry your camera with you as much as you could?
I should probably carry it with me more, but I made a decision. If I'm by myself, that's a whole different thing. But I made a decision a while back that it was really unfair to my family and my kids to have them keep stopping the car so I could get out, because it's not just you take a quick picture.
Right.
I need to be out there for a while. And I did it once along, I think it was the Northeast Extension going up to upstate New York. And I drove past this cliff years and years, and the light was right. I think I had my kids in the car. I can't quite remember, but I'm on the side of the thruway or the turnpike or whatever, taking all these photographs, and it's not fair to them.
Yeah.
It's not.
Art with a conscience. I like that. When you're photographing, are you the kind of photographer that can just like click, I got it, move on? Or do you need to maybe wait a little bit and wait for the light, or take a few and
I take
edit?
a few. It's not usually just one unless it's the last frame on the camera. It's like,
Okay.
I hope that's good. I mean, sometimes I will see something, and if I'm loading my film and then the light changes, I'll sit there and wait to see if it comes back. And it never comes back in the same way I first saw it. It might come back better. But no, I try not. I mean, as a film photographer, we never really overshot, I don't think.
Right.
And you looked and you waited and you took,
I mean, I grew up in an age of film too, so I understand that like preciousness of the photo.
Yeah. And I think too, when you shoot in pinhole, depending on what kind of pinhole camera you have, you're sitting there for a little bit waiting for that picture to make itself. And, if I'm using a really large camera, it can be 10 minutes or so. And so you're also experiencing the time it took to make the image. So you're not going to take 10 pictures. You're going to take more.
Right. I love that. So I thought about this question earlier, and I think it's appropriate. Do you consider your works to be autobiographical at all in nature, or do you try to make them separate from yourself? Oh, I stumped her.
I've never been asked that question before, but I think they can't be separate from me.
Okay.
I think so maybe they are autobiographical. Yeah. I mean, it's like with my work, I'm not trying at all to like I don't try to hit anybody over the head with like, oh, if you're throwing all this stuff down the drain, these chemicals down the drain, or you're not paying attention, that all these horrible things are going to happen, or the trees will all be gone, or what. But I think those are things I think about. So I think that that the work is just sort of an extension of what goes on in my head.
Yeah. I get you. I mean, sometimes artists can say, especially photographers, I'm documenting my life and this is how it goes along.
Like
but
that, no.
Yeah, I didn't.
It wouldn't be a very good story.
That you'd probably turn around and document your kids in the car. So that's.
They wouldn't want it like that either.
When you're making your work, do you ever think about the viewer, or do you consider your work more driven by your own desire for the image?
I think that there's enough of the commercial photographer left in me that I do think about the viewer.
Okay.
more than I sometimes need to. You know what I mean?
I'm just curious by this. I've been asking this question to other artists, and the number of them that say they never pay attention to the viewer has been
Now,
a little shocking to me. So
I think that what I don't do is I don't ever stop myself from making work even if I am making something, it's like, ooh, somebody wouldn't like that. I will never stop making that. I'll make that. But I think I do consider, if I consider it, is this interesting for somebody would somebody enjoy looking at this?
well,
Really?
your work is, I mean, you aren't really manipulating the viewer because you're making smaller works. I mean, you're not making, 8 foot
Right.
wide, so you
Mhm.
are bringing them up close, and your pictures are very intimate. You're having I think, an intimate conversation with people. That's very different from shouting at them from across the room.
Right.
Have you ever experimented with other materials aside from photography? Have you ever tried your hand at, say, sculpture or
Yeah.
drawing or painting or anything like that?
Love
Or
it.
have you really focused?
No, I mean, I've tried them all, and I actually, it. If I could be a great painter, I would love to be a great painter. But
Okay.
when one of our kids was down at Fleischer, rather than just dropping her off for art class, I took a watercolor class, and I loved it. I
Mhm.
loved it because there was zero expectation there. But I do find that I connect really myself. I am drawn towards people who paint, probably because I'm using watercolor paints and I'm interested in how they're using paint. And I sometimes wish I knew a little more about that and what might that change my gum pieces. I don't know.
Well,
But
because of your gum pieces, I would consider you a painter. I mean,
yeah,
you're painting within
yeah,
a template kind of a thing,
yeah,
but you're still,
yeah.
the
Um,
gradations of it, how it fuses out. I mean, that's painterly qualities as far as
yeah, it is. It is. The dimensional work is new for me. It does, I wouldn't put it off the table that I might not, give, you know, more sculptural work a try. Why not?
yeah. Well, to live
Yeah.
and learn, I guess. So that would be the thing. How often are you in your studio?
As often as I can be. When when I'm not teaching, I'm in there every day.
Okay.
I'm in there every day, and a lot of times, I'll go in on weekends. Everybody knows I'm happier when I'm able to make my art.
Okay.
My family knows
I
that.
totally get that. If I'm not kept in art supplies on a regular basis, I get itchy and weird. So I totally get it.
And I appreciate being in a studio setting
Hmm.
where other artists they're disciplined and
Hmm.
they're in there every day too. And it's,
When you're in your studio, do you have certain rituals that you need to do every day to get started, or do you just go in and
usually
just
clean up from the session before. It's
funny
usually
enough, you're
clean
the
up from
second artist like this week that's told me that they ruin their studio and leave it as a disaster, and cleaning up is part of the process.
Well, I think there's this for me, there's sometimes I get to the end of the day and I'm like a little exhausted of if I've made a lot of work, I've been really like drawn into something and I keep thinking I should go home and it's 3 hours later and I haven't gone home. I think that there's a depletion sort of that happens and I just can't deal with nobody else is going to see it. So I'll come back in the next day. But I do I have found that I'm going outside to expose a lot more now than I had been in the past. I have a UV box that I use and another kind of exposure unit, but I find that that I'm using the sunlight more now, and I like that I go in and out of my studio and sit outside in the sun while something's exposing. Um, because I think that like 8 hours in my indoor studio is not really that healthy. You need the outdoors.
I get you. So I've got time for just one final question for you. Question I love asking artists. Simple question. What does making art do for you?
Um, well, I think that I would I can't imagine not making art. You know, I can't imagine that I would be a very happy person if I didn't make art. So I think what it does for me is, well, I think it keeps me thinking. I mean, I do think it keeps things, ideas coming, and me wanting to research and learn things. But I think it also keeps me sane.
Yeah.
You know, it does. It's more
I
for
was
me.
waiting for that word to come.
I think I do it way more for me than I make art for other people. I love that other people like my art, but I think that when you're, and I've talked to other artists who feel the same way, it's like you get to a point, if you've been away from your art for a while, that you just have to go make something. I have to go make something. And what's that expression? If mama isn't happy, nobody's happy, or
Right.
whatever.
Right. Exactly. I
Yeah,
totally get it.
yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we're just out of time. I want to thank you so much for coming
Thank
by and
you.
talking to me today about your work. I love it when an artist can say something that makes their work just sort of transform for me right away. So it was great, a real pleasure speaking with you. I also want to thank everybody else who tuned in to watch today. We really appreciate it when you like, share, and subscribe these videos. It really helps keep us going. And if you have any questions, you can always put them in the comments section. If I am not able to answer them, I can always pass them on to Laurie. That would be great. So I want to thank you very much for coming by today. Thanks for watching Art Show. And again, thank you, Laurie. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot.